from now. First of all, we need to know about the TV series Lupin III, which Miyazaki joined halfway through the production, before we understand what kind of anime the Castle of Cagliostro was. And to understand the TV series, we have to understand the original manga version, written by Monkey Punch. Now, I want to know how many of you have read this. You have, really? When it came out in a manga magazine, I took glimpses of it at restaurants or the dentist that I used to go to. Oh, many of you have. Nice. Good job, guys. This is how the pictures look. Like this. They're drawn in detail. Back then, the style of comics with a realistic narrative was yet to establish, so the amount of information on each page was enormous. And Inspector Zenigata is looking for Lupin here, but Lupin is actually hiding right here. Hold on. Can you see? This is Lupin. He's disguised and in the crowd. Yeah, this guy in glasses. This is the first chapter where Lupin comes out in the manga. Stylish pictures, huh? And of course they are stylish. It's because Monkey Punch was deeply influenced by a comic artist called Mort Drucker, who was a regular contributor to a subculture magazine called Mad in the US. So this is an illustration by Drucker. Do you see the resemblance? For example, he drew a woman's thighs thick and waist narrow. Also, if you pay attention to people's palms and legs, you'd know. They are so large, as if these people have acromegaly. So these are some of the characteristics of Mort Drucker's illustration. Monkey Punch was someone who took these characteristics and implemented them into the style of Japanese comic strips. Lupin III was in a magazine called Manga Action from 1967 to 69 and became his most important work. Now, his pen name, Monkey Punch, was named by the chief editor of the magazine, who also came up with the name of Ken Tsukikage. The chief editor was a strange man, like the producer of The God of Entertainment. He named manga artists as he pleased, and he didn't even discuss them. Monkey Punch didn't like the name Monkey Punch, but he thought, oh well, it's just a temporary name until this series is over. So he accepted the name, but since Lupin III became his biggest hit, he had to keep using the same name until today. Anyway, soon after the manga became popular, its anime version was planned. You can read the background stories of this project in a book written by an animator called Yasuo Otsuka titled The Ambition of Little Nemo. This book is amazing, so you should all buy it and read. Now, I'll refer to one episode. Back then, Fuji TV broadcasted one of the first full-scale black and white anime series, Astro Boy, which was a hit. Their panicked rival broadcaster TBS decided to make their own anime as well, but there was no one to commission it to. Toei Animation stayed away from TV animes. Mushi Production was busy with Astro Boy, so they commissioned a friend of a TBS employee called Yutaka Fujioka, who was running a puppet theater at the time. Then, Fujioka made a company called Tokyo Movie that later made the TV version of Lupin III. But the request from TBS was to make an anime ASAP, so the first TV anime called Big X was on air even before the company was established. Big X was a hit, so Tokyo Movie produced the first series of Little Ghost Q-Taro. But even then, they were short of animators, so they would try to poach from Toei or Mushi Production by negotiating at their company's entrances. We'll pay you this much, what do you think? And they actually paid at the site. Pretty disgusting. But Fujioka wasn't the only disgusting one, so were the animators. When they made Little Ghost Q-Taro, they cheated on the numbers of their drawings. When one sheet was enough to draw Kyutaro, they drew the body on one sheet, a hand on another, eyes on the third, and a mouth on the fourth. And they claimed 6 sheets as their workload. They ripped off amateur staff members who accepted them easily. As a result, those animators made good money. Later, Otsuka confessed that it was tough to find those cheating animators and fire them. It's a famous story. Some people say that animators have always been mistreated, but that's not true at all. They were making a sucker of those who didn't have knowledge about animation. People were living strongly back then. So, after Little Ghost Kyutaro, Tokyo Movie made Star of the Giants in color, and this was a huge hit. They grew in confidence after Star of the Giants. Next, they made Lupin III to target an adult audience. So, what was going on during that time? It was 1968. Lupin III was still in the magazine. At that time, Yasuo Otsuka, now a veteran animator who was an animation director of the Castle of Cagliostro and is still working. He is quite a character. But anyway, at that time, he was at a racing circuit in Chiba for his hobby. I don't mean a racing circuit for toy cars. You take your own car there and race. So, Otsuka owned the same Fiat that Lupin drives in the anime. It was Otsuka's favorite car. He drove his Fiat to Chiba and raced around the circuit vigorously. He was in the actual competitions, so he was playing the real games. One day, he noticed this strange guy who had always come and sat near him. He was wearing light brown sunglasses and he could see his thin, shady-looking eyes through the lens. And the guy went, "This place is amazing. So what do you do for a living?" "Oh, anime, huh? Erg, Japanese animes don't know how to draw cars." Then he said, "So you are an animator. Can you draw these real cars racing in the circuit this powerfully? I don't think you can. I don't think any Japanese animators can." Somehow this mysterious guy kept pressuring Otsuka. Otsuka was like, "What is wrong with this weird old man?" The guy was actually Fujioka, the CEO of Tokyo Movie, and Fujioka was trying to headhunt Otsuka, just like he did to Mushi Production animators. Otsuka was a staff member of Toei Animation at that time, but Fujioka wanted him in his own company and to join Lupin III. So he came to the auto races every week, which he wasn't really interested in, just to entice Otsuka little by little. Eventually, though, Otsuka started thinking, what a weird guy, but he's kinda interesting. However, by then, Fujioka had already recruited a colleague member of his puppet theater called Masaaki Osumi as the director of Lupin III. But Lupin III was struggling to find a sponsor and broadcaster. They set the goal to make an anime for adults, but no one ever wanted such a thing. All animes were targeted at kids, and no matter how cheaply made, they all earned a 20% or 30% viewing rate. It was that kind of an era. A fun anime would earn 40%, boring ones 20%. So the makers thought there was no point in doing extra work or risking themselves by making an adult-targeted anime, which PTAs would attack. Sponsors hated the idea as well. But Fujioka was an eager man. Meanwhile, he also obtained the copyright of Moomin. This was because Big X was a manga by Osamu Tezuka. Little Ghost Kyutaro was by Fujio Fujiko. And Star of the Giants was by Noboru Kawasaki. They couldn't make a profit out of Japanese mangas because the publishers owned the rights. Fujioka was ambitious to make his businesses bigger and global. He was one of the first people in Japan to start anime adaptations of juvenile literature. That's why he first bought the rights to Moomin and made it into an anime, which Otsuka joined as a production team member. Meanwhile, Miyazaki and Takahata thought Toei Animation had no future, but Tokyo Movie did for producing Moomin. So they joined A Production, which was a subsidiary company of Tokyo Movie. Then they tried to make Pippi Longstocking there. Sorry, I'm deviating a bit. So back to the timeline, Miyazaki and Takahata joined. Okay. right here. He entered a production in order to produce Pippi Longstocking. But even so, they couldn't receive a green light from the author of Pippi Longstocking. That's the overall flow. But Miyazaki and Takahata didn't have any clue on how Pippi Longstocking would be rejected by the author, because they had a good feeling when they were in negotiation. But that was also when the TV version of Lupin III finally started. Miyazaki was interested in Lupin III to some extent, but didn't think it was his job to direct it. So the first season of Lupin III began directed by Osumi. Osumi's concept for Lupin was to set characters who reflected the post-60s young generation in Japan, who no longer had any passion or interest in politics or social activities. To be more specific, Lupin is a descendant of a French aristocracy. His grandfather, Lupin I, was the master thief, Arsène Lupin. So he's super rich. Lupin III received a great inheritance from him, so he actually doesn't need to steal. He rather wants to have fun because he's bored. That's why failing to steal doesn't mean anything to him. He just laughs it all away and indulges in women, gambling, and wine. He just lives hedonistically every day. That was Osumi's plan. And their sponsor finally accepted that plan. Because their sponsor was that well known, cough drop brand in Japan called Asada Ame. As you all know, Asada Ame being a snack or drug company, well, it's a drug company. So, being a drug company, they couldn't allow their sponsored anime to have a main character who stole in every episode. Asada Ame's request was not to let Lupin kill people, even though he's a thief. And their next request was to not let him steal things. That's why Lupin is a thief but fails every time. Or even when he succeeds, he ends up stealing invaluable things. This was the original setting for the TV series, which was kept until today. That's why, although Lupin is a thief throughout the series, he rarely succeeds in thieving. There's a scene in the opening where he is on a helicopter with a piece of jewelry he has stolen. Although there are moments, he usually fails in the episodes. But that was intentional. But that didn't matter, because in Osumi's concept, he's a descendant of aristocracy and has great wealth. Now, I wish I had a better image to show you how Lupin was drawn during that time. The whole animation team of Star of the Giants, an epic baseball manga, produced Lupin III. So, here, Otsuka had to struggle so much to have things done properly. Maybe I'll have the image right here. Otsuka had such a difficult time. Because the animators had been drawing baseball players until recently, they drew everyone with good postures. So Otsuka had to instruct them how he needed to stand. Lupin was supposed to stand leaning on one foot, like diagonally. Without his instructions, Lupin always ended up standing like an athlete. Otsuka was like, no, make him look softer like a jellyfish. When he sits, he doesn't sit straight, make him slack every single time. He explained that over and over to the animators. So it was a lot of work, but finally Lupin III started on TV. But like I said, fun animes used to receive a 40% viewing rate. Even boring animes at least earn 20%. Now guess the number of Lupin's first episode. 9%, which dropped and dropped every episode until it was 6%. The advertising agency complained first, although they said earlier, let's make anime new for adults. Next, Asada Ame saw it as well, and they complained too. So they called Osumi to hold a response meeting. But director Osumi argued back, what's happening is exactly what we have expected. This anime is for adults, and adults don't watch anime. And 9%? A good number. But neither the sponsor or the broadcaster nodded their heads. Osumi got upset, and he stopped coming to meetings after. So Lupin pretty much lost their director around the 6th or 7th episode. Then, the people who caught Fujioka's attention were Miyazaki and Takahata. In addition to the commercial depression of Lupin, because the anime adaptation Pippi Longstocking was rejected, Tokyo Movie was almost going bankrupt. They spent 3 years producing Lupin III, but it received only a 6% viewing rate. Not only that, a feature anime film, Pippi Longstockings, was rejected by the author. They didn't know what to do now, but they had to do something, so they forced Takahata and Miyazaki to support the first season of Lupin III. But in my opinion, I think they are historically the worst two to help improve the viewing rate. But they're both serious and hardworking, so they did what they could. Miyazaki tried to completely remodel Lupin III. To do that, he got rid of the setting that Lupin was a French aristocrat. He replaced the setting that he was a bored rich man who stole for a hobby. Now, he was a poor Italian man who always goggled his eyes, looking for fun. It was a drastic change from French aristocrat to poor Italian man. Now, the car Lupin drove during that time, in the first season, it's a car called Mercedes-Benz SSK. Mercedes-Benz SSK is super expensive today. And it was super expensive back then. Because I think they've only made 30 of them in the world, on top of them being limited in number. SSK has a 12-cylinder piston engine that Ferrari installs. Including that engine, one SSK costs about 14 million US dollars. And that's his car? No way! You see, Lupin has indulged in luxury throughout his life, so he's bored of it. He's fed up with luxury and just wants a car that moves. Miyazaki said, "Oh, that looks good," and pointed at Otsuka's cherished car, Fiat 500, outside the window and said, "How about that car? That looks cheap and beaten up." Otsuka said, "That's my car." Anyway, so Fiat became Lupin's car. So, in the 16th episode of the first season of Lupin, called Operation Jewelry Snatch, there's a scene where Lupin steals Fujiko's car and drives away. After that, it becomes his car. So, you may think Fiat became his car from Cagliostro, but it was his car ever since Miyazaki joined the TV series in 1971 and brought in his own setting. In Miyazaki's mind, making the main character of anime drink expensive champagne and drive an expensive car that is super limited in number was so out of fashion. So, rather, he wanted Lupin to drive an ordinary car and be hungry for thrills, so the style shifted. I think the first season is strangely appealing because it's a good mixture of Lupin as an aristocrat as well as a poor and hungry man. Miyazaki was also unhappy about Lupin's gun, Walther P38, that the German military mass-produced millions of. He complained, "What kind of an aristocrat uses a cheap, mass-produced gun like that? I thought Lupin was a Frenchman. How dare he use Walther P38? He also attacked how shallow the characters were. Otsumi originally said his concept received inspiration from Tom and Jerry. You know, it's an anime series where Jerry the mouse runs away and Tom the cat gets mad and chases Jerry. Just like that, Lupin runs away and Zenigata gets mad and chases him. It's a comedy. But Miyazaki hated that idea. He said, "Why make another cliche anime? How are we gonna make many series out of it? Lupin is not a single 5 minutes anime. How can Takahata and I have passion for Tom and Jerry?" It was not when he made Cagliostro, but already back in 1971, Miyazaki strongly insisted that in order for the characters of Lupin to develop, it needed to be more than just playing tag. During that time, Miyazaki also clearly stated that Lupin had only been good as a manga when it had been published in 1968. Therefore, there was no place for him in 1971. He even wrote it on the project proposal. So one more time, let's go back to the timeline. So after this, after Miyazaki joined to support Lupin in 1972 and 73, he joined the production of Panda Go Panda, then moved to Zuiyo and joined the production of Heidi, Girl of the Alps. Now, after Heidi, he worked on 3,000 Leagues in Search of Mother. Sorry, this is taking long. It's already past 40 minutes, but let me continue. Unless I talk about Cagliostro, I don't think I can move on to the paid part. So, after Heidi, Girl of the Alps, and 3,000 Leagues in Search of Mother ended, he started questioning his stance as an animator. Ever since he was making The Great Adventure of Horace, his role was to submit storyboards, which Takahata accepted. That's what Miyazaki always did. No matter what he did, when he thought something was interesting, he drew them, one after another, with his enormous drawing ability. When directors saw them, they couldn't refuse them. Then those new drawings changed the plot and the story became Miyazaki's. That was his strategy since he was a newbie. But for Heidi and 3,000 Leagues, he couldn't do that for the first time. All he could do was to serve Takahata. Until then, Miyazaki could flip Takahata's original ideas with his storyboards. Then Takahata was like, oh, that's cool, let's use it. But because Takahata was a director who was so loyal to original stories and Heidi and 3,000 Leagues had original stories, he didn't compromise to the suggestions for a change. Although Miyazaki worked so hard, he was just working as a tool to visualize and elaborate Takahata's ideas, nothing more. It was in a way ideal for Miyazaki, who admired Takahata, but he could no longer do things as he wanted. I understand how he felt. I didn't want to be the representative at the Japan Sci-Fi Convention. I hated being like a leader of a committee. I rather wanted to be the second or third important figure who would suggest but does not decide. I later heard a Gainax anime producer, Taka Miyakai, also liked that position when we worked together. So did current Gainax CEO Yamaga, which makes it everyone. Creators love being under CEOs and representatives so that they can complain as much as they want. If their ideas get accepted, great. If not, just complain more. Miyazaki too was in that position. But Takahata finally learned how to manage Miyazaki's talent. He handled Miyazaki so well when he produced 3,000 Leagues and Heidi. And as a result, when NHK offered Miyazaki to be involved in Future Boy Conan, he volunteered to be a director. At that time, he was questioning, am I just gonna end up as one of the staff members? If I want to make what I truly hope to make, I have to direct. That's how he started making Future Boy Conan in 1977. However, while he was making Conan, he ran into a problem again, which I already talked about when I lectured about Laputa. It was that he, as a director, had to turn down the scenes that his colleague animators submitted. His colleague animators included Yasuo Otsuka, a longtime friend of Miyazaki and his elder. Otsuka also asked Miyazaki, let me draw Lana too. But Miyazaki said, you can't. You have to draw Jimzy. So he had to turn down his friend's request. Otsuka pleaded, but Miyazaki had to say, when it comes to Lana, I'm the only one who can draw her. And there were numerous similar circumstances to the point he was very depressed. He quickly lost his friends. He said, I have no friends now. When Conan ended, not only because he felt accomplished, but also because of the reason I just mentioned, he went to Takahata and begged, please let me help you with Anne of Green Gables. So he became Takahata's animator again. But as I said, the first day Miyazaki joined the team, he started criticizing another animator sitting next to him, saying, you did it wrong, give it to me, and fix their drawings, which brought chaos to the studio. Moreover, Miyazaki couldn't devote himself to Anne of Green Gables, was because of Yoshifumi Kondo, aka Kibun Kondo among his fans, who later directed Whisper of the Heart. Kondo was Takahata's partner in Anne of Green Gables. Kondo was the central figure, and the world of Anne of Green Gables was created by him, who was the animation director. Miyazaki realized it was no longer the past when he could make unreasonable requests and Takahata accepted them, so he couldn't find his place in the team. By the way, Kondo is truly a genius of anime. You remember when Takahata and Miyazaki made Grave of the Fireflies and My Neighbor Totoro respectively? At that time, they tried to steal Kondo from each other. Takahata said, "You can take anyone you want except for him. Please let me have Kon-chan." Then Miyazaki fought back, "If Kon-chan won't join Totoro, I won't direct." So they fought a big fight. But when they fought, they always did it directly, but both bitched indirectly to producer Toshio Suzuki. Suzuki had a long negotiation with Miyazaki, and at the end, Suzuki said, "Miya-san, you can draw, but Takahata can't. Let him have at least one skilled draftsman." It was a challenging negotiation. But while Miyazaki was crying, "No, I don't want anyone else. I want Kon-chan," Takahata stole away Hideaki Anno as well. Quite a nerve, huh? Anyway, it was a big incident. To sum up, that's how gifted Kondo was. Now, when Miyazaki was depressed after seeing Takahata and Kondo working together for Anne of Green Gables, a new company called Telecom was about to be established. It was the animation company that later made The Castle of Cagliostro. So, finally, we are on the later half of the timeline. So Miyazaki moved to Telecom after Conan was broadcasted. Then he was part of Little Nemo. He was the Japanese director candidate along with Takahata. Then The Castle of Cagliostro was released. What happened during this 1 year? Am I switching to the paid part? No, not yet. There's something I need to talk about beforehand, so I'll continue the free part a bit more. I think if I ended here, I'd be ripping you off. Sorry, it's getting hot, so let me take this off. I'm like a rakugo storyteller. I mean, I just talked about the first 2 minutes of pre-credit.